Ryan's office revenge.
She thought my credentials gave her the keys to brilliance. They gave her career suicide. I watched her build a presentation on 7 files of pure fiction, then watched the implosion from the best seat in the house. I'm Garrett Stone, 51 years old, single father, and according to my annual reviews, technically exceptional, but lacking executive presence for client-facing roles. Translation: he does the work, but we can't picture him schmoozing at cocktail parties with defense contractors. That assessment might sting if it weren't so useful. Being invisible in corporate America is like running silent in a submarine. You see everything, hear everything, and nobody notices you're there until it's too late. I spent 22 years in the Navy, most of it underwater on fast attack subs in the Pacific Fleet. Crypto specialist, TS, SCI clearance, the kind of background that makes HR departments nervous and clients feel secure. When you've monitored enemy communications 200 feet below the surface for months at a time, corporate office politics feels like amateur hour. The skills transfer more than you'd think. Patience isn't just useful in submarine warfare, it's survival. Rush to periscope depth without proper sonar analysis, and you surface into a destroyer's path. Rush into workplace confrontation without documentation, and you surface into unemployment. My wife Sarah understood this better than most. 3 years since cancer took her, and I still catch myself adjusting my watch band when the office gets tense. Old habit from the boat. She used to tease me about it. Still timing your depth charges, sailor? Now it's just me and Emma. 17 senior year. College applications scattered across our kitchen table like battle plans. Stanford, UC San Diego, MIT. Each one represents about $70,000 a year in tuition costs I don't currently have. The Navy gave me skills, experience, and a modest pension. It didn't give me Stanford money. That's how I ended up at Maritime Defense Solutions in San Diego, analyzing naval contracts and trying to bridge the gap between military reality and civilian expectations. Most days, I translate what defense contractors actually need versus what consultants think they want. It's honest work that pays well enough to keep Emma's dreams realistic. Everything changed when we landed Naval Systems Corp. $45 million to modernize their submarine detection algorithms and secure their Pacific Fleet communications. The kind of contract that requires TS clearance, submarine experience, and deep understanding of naval operations. Exactly what I'd been building toward for 3 years. Rachel Chambers, our CEO and former Navy commander, made it clear during the kickoff meeting. Garrett will be critical to this project's success. His submarine crypto background and security clearance are precisely what Naval Systems needs. For about 5 minutes, I thought this might finally be my shot. Then HR announced their major recruitment win. They'd poached a rising star from McKinsey, someone who would transform our client relationships and bring innovative thinking to government contracting. The announcement featured a photo of Madison Taylor looking like she'd stepped out of a consulting firm's diversity brochure. 209 years old, MBA credentials, and a resume that read like business school mythology. Madison arrived that Wednesday like she owned the place. Within an hour, she was working the office like a campaign candidate, all firm handshakes and strategic eye contact. I watched from my corner desk as she introduced herself with the practiced confidence of someone who'd never had a strategy questioned by naval procurement officers. Rachel introduced her during our morning stand-up. Madison will be spearheading our naval systems engagement. Her experience with federal contracting transformation will revolutionize how we approach defense clients. Then, almost as an afterthought, Garrett will handle all technical development, research, and security protocols. Handle. That word that means everything and nothing. In Navy terms, handle means you do the navigation while someone else takes credit for getting the ship to port. I'd sailed these waters before. Madison found me that afternoon, didn't knock, just walked into my workspace like she'd purchased it. In the Navy, you announce yourself when entering someone's quarters. It's basic respect for territory and chain of command. Civilians who ignore this protocol usually ignore other important boundaries. You must be Garrett, she said, flashing that consultant smile I'd seen in 100 Pentagon briefings. I've heard you're the technical expert around here. Her eyes scanned my workspace, cataloging my submarine service plaques, deployment photos, and the stack of classified protocol manuals that most people mistake for decoration. She leaned against my doorframe like she belonged there. I'm excited to collaborate. I have some disruptive approaches to the Naval Systems project that will completely transform their operational paradigm. I smiled politely, internally calculating how many hours I'd waste explaining why naval security protocols exist for good reasons. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, I said, genuinely curious about what revolutionary approaches she developed during her first 6 hours at a defense contractor. Madison's revolutionary approach, as it turned out, involved leveraging digital transformation to disrupt traditional naval procurement paradigms. Translation: she wanted to ignore 50 years of security protocols because they seemed inefficient. When I mentioned Tempest compliance requirements, she waved dismissively. Those are legacy restrictions. Innovation requires challenging conventional limitations. I'd heard similar logic from junior officers fresh out of the academy who thought submarine protocols were suggestions rather than life-saving procedures. The results were usually educational and occasionally catastrophic. Over the following weeks, Madison's approach to collaboration became clear. It started with requests. "Hey Garrett, can you send me the threat assessment for Naval Systems Pacific operations?" Then evolved into expectations. "I need the cryptographic compliance framework by close of business. No please, no thank you." Just assumption that my time belonged to her timeline. By week 2, she was forwarding client inquiries with "only handle this" typed at the top. When I suggested including her in technical calls so she could understand Naval Systems specific requirements, she explained that her time was better spent on strategic visioning while I focused on tactical implementation. The translation was becoming clear. Madison would attend high-visibility meetings with executives while I handled the actual work of understanding client needs, researching naval requirements, and developing compliant solutions. She'd present my analysis as her insights, my frameworks as her innovations, and my 22 years of submarine experience as her natural business instincts. Bradley Walsh, the young Navy veteran I'd been mentoring, noticed the pattern during one of our weekly check-ins. We usually grabbed coffee in the break room around 3 p.m. when the office quieted down. "Garrett, Madison's taking credit for the sonar detection protocols you developed for the oceanic contract," he said, keeping his voice low. She told Rachel it was based on her previous experience with naval acoustics. I'd warned Bradley about office politics during his first week. Watch everything. Document everything. In corporate warfare, just like naval operations, situational awareness keeps you alive. The kid was learning faster than I'd hoped he'd need to. "What previous experience?" I asked, stirring my coffee. "She's got an MBA and 3 years at McKinsey." That doesn't exactly translate to underwater acoustic signature analysis. Bradley shook his head. "That's what I thought, but she talks like she understands it. Uses all the right terminology, references specific submarine classes. If you didn't know better, you'd think she actually knew what she was talking about. She was good at it. I had to give her that." Madison had mastered the art of confident incompetence. Take someone else's technical work, strip away the nuanced understanding that makes it actually functional, and present it with enough buzzwords to fool executives who measure success in PowerPoint slides rather than operational results. The problem was, naval security doesn't care about PowerPoint presentations. Get the technical details wrong on a submarine detection system, and you don't just lose a contract. You potentially compromise fleet operations that keep sailors alive. I started documenting everything. Every email request, every forwarded assignment, every meeting where my work appeared under her name. Military habits die hard, and proper record-keeping had saved my career more than once during my Navy years. The breaking point came on a Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. I was deep into developing a complex cryptographic security framework when Madison burst through my door without announcement. Her body language radiated entitlement and urgency, the combination that usually preceded unreasonable demands. "I need your login credentials for the Naval Systems project folders," she stated. Not requested, stated. "I'm assembling a preliminary presentation for the client and need immediate access to all working documents." In the Navy, unauthorized access to classified materials was a court-martial offense. In corporate America, it was apparently standard procedure for rising stars. "Those folders contain working documents," I replied carefully. "They're not client-ready. Some contain Tempest-restricted information that requires specific handling protocols." She waved dismissively, the same gesture she'd used when I mentioned security regulations. "I understand what I'm doing. I just need to pull some frameworks for Friday's checkpoint meeting. Email me the credentials." I could have explained security protocols. I could have insisted on proper authorization channels. I could have escalated to Rachel and demanded clarification about document access policies. Instead, I remembered something my old CO used to say. Sometimes the best way to teach someone about depth charges is to let them set one off in shallow water. "I'll send you the credentials," I said, maintaining professional neutrality. "Everything you need should be in the project folders." As her footsteps faded down the corridor, I sat motionless, staring at my monitor. 3 years of being overlooked, watching my work vanish into other people's highlight reels, being told I wasn't leadership material while leaders presented my strategies to clients who trusted my expertise. That's when I decided to fight back. I opened a new folder and began typing NAVSys Ampriel Deliverables GS. my initials barely visible at the end. The trap was about to be armed. Creating those dummy files felt like planning a submarine operation. Each one needed to be perfect, in its imperfection professional enough to pass casual inspection, flawed enough to detonate under scrutiny from naval security officers who'd spent decades identifying contractor incompetence. I spent the next 3 evenings after Madison left crafting my masterpieces. The office was empty by 7 p.m., just the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of San Diego traffic. Perfect conditions for tactical planning. File 1. Acoustic signature analysis that confused commercial sonar with classified submarine detection protocols. Any naval officer would spot this instantly. It's like posting patrol routes on social media. Beautiful to amateurs, horrifying to professionals. The document looked impressive, color-coded charts, detailed frequency analyses, professional formatting that would make any MBA proud. But underneath the polish, I'd embedded a fatal flaw. The core methodology recommended using commercial fishing sonar frequencies to track nuclear submarines. It was like trying to find a stealth fighter with a weather radar. File 2. Cryptographic security brief that recommended encryption standards prohibited for naval communications. Again, the visual design was stunning. I'd spent 2 hours on the graphics alone, but the underlying recommendations would trigger immediate security investigations from anyone who actually understood Navy crypto protocols. I created 7 files total, each one a precisely crafted weapon waiting to backfire. Communication protocols that would expose submarine positions, partnership recommendations with vendors who lacked security clearance, pricing models that violated federal acquisition regulations. The genius was in the details. Each document included my standard naming conventions and digital signatures, with timestamps showing creation dates weeks before Madison arrived. Anyone who bothered to check the metadata would see exactly who created the original work. Madison took the bait within hours of receiving my credentials. I watched the access logs like a sonar operator tracking enemy signatures. She downloaded everything renamed files to strip my initials and started incorporating my poisoned intelligence into her presentation materials. The most satisfying moment came during our team update the next morning. Madison stood at the front of the conference room presenting my corrupted frameworks with the confidence of an admiral briefing the Joint Chiefs. I worked late last night developing these acoustic approaches, she announced, pointing to visualizations I'd created weeks earlier. The insights are revolutionary. Bradley raised his hand and I felt proud of the kid. That detection methodology seems risky for classified operations. Are we really recommending commercial-grade sonar for submarine tracking? Madison's smile never wavered, but I caught the micro-expression of someone scrambling for justification. That's exactly the conventional thinking we need to challenge. Sometimes strategy requires bold approaches that make traditional naval experts uncomfortable. She clicked to the next slide. My intentionally disastrous compliance plan. Look at these efficiency opportunities. This is why naval systems hired us to revolutionize their approach. I maintained neutral expression, taking notes like a supportive team member. Internally, I was cataloging every false claim, every misrepresentation, every moment she passed off my sabotaged work as revolutionary thinking. Rachel Chambers leaned forward from the back of the room. The strategic work looks exceptional. Garrett, your security expertise really shows through. Actually, Madison interjected smoothly, while Garrett provided some initial data gathering. I've completely reimagined the strategic direction based on my previous federal contracting experience. This represents a fundamentally different approach than traditional defense consultants typically recommend. I smiled and nodded. Madison has definitely put her unique perspective on things. Let her claim it, let her own it. Let her build her entire reputation on strategies that would fail spectacularly under federal scrutiny. The following month became a careful dance of calculated support. Madison would demand new strategies, always urgent, always last minute. I'd provide them from my special folder, each file a precisely crafted weapon waiting to backfire. She started sharing them directly with Naval Systems leadership, attaching her name as lead strategist, occasionally remembering to credit me in footnotes as research support. The more she presented, the more committed she became to the fiction. She couldn't reverse course without admitting she'd been presenting garbage for weeks. Meanwhile, I maintained parallel workflows. The dummy files continued feeding Madison's growing confidence while I built the real strategy in secured folders only I could access. The actual naval systems analysis told a completely different story. Genuine operational security protocols, authentic positioning strategies, and actionable insights that would legitimately transform their Pacific Fleet communications. Every framework was documented. every assumption explained, and every recommendation grounded in my 22 years of combined military and civilian experience. This was my insurance policy, waiting in the wings while Madison performed her dance of destruction with my poisoned intelligence. Emma noticed I was working later than usual. She'd find me at the kitchen table around 10 p.m., laptop open, surrounded by coffee cups and technical manuals. "Dad, you okay?" She asked one evening, looking up from her calculus homework. "You've been pretty focused on work lately." "Big project," I said, not wanting to worry her. "Could determine whether we can afford Stanford without taking out massive loans." She nodded, understanding immediately. Emma had inherited Sarah's practical intelligence. She knew the college fund wasn't infinite, and she'd watched me stretch our budget to keep her options open. "If Stanford doesn't work out, UC San Diego has an excellent engineering program," she said quietly, "and I'd still be close to home." That's when I knew I had to make this work, not for my ego, not for revenge against Madison, but for Emma's future. She shouldn't have to compromise her dreams because some consultant decided to steal my work and tank our biggest contract. The preliminary review with Naval Systems was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Madison had already sent them the complete deck for advance review, 52 slides of beautiful incompetence. Admiral Patricia Cross and her team would be expecting strategic brilliance. Instead, they'd get security violations that would make any naval officer reach for the court-martial handbook. I spent the weekend preparing my real presentation. Not the sanitized version Madison would present, but the actual strategic analysis Naval Systems needed. Submarine detection protocols based on legitimate acoustic science, cryptographic frameworks that enhanced rather than compromised fleet security, communication systems that protected rather than exposed Pacific Fleet operations. Monday morning, Madison was practically vibrating with confidence. She'd rehearsed her presentation dozens of times, memorized every slide, prepared for questions she assumed would focus on implementation timelines rather than fundamental security flaws. "Tomorrow's going to be amazing," she told me, stopping by my desk with that consultant smile. "I can feel it. This presentation is going to change everything for our company." She was right about that, just not in the way she expected. "I'm sure it will be memorable," I replied, adjusting my watch band. That afternoon, Bradley stopped by my office with a concerned expression. "Garrett, I've been thinking about tomorrow's presentation. Some of those recommendations Madison's planning to show, they don't feel right. The submarine detection protocols especially. Are you sure about those approaches?" I looked at the kid for a long moment. He'd served 4 years on a Los Angeles-class attack sub before joining our company. He understood operational security better than most civilians. His instincts were good. "Bradley, what would you do if you knew someone was about to present classified submarine capabilities to executives using protocols that could compromise fleet operations?" He didn't hesitate. "I'd make sure the right information was available when it mattered. That's exactly what I'm planning to do." Tuesday morning arrived gray and foggy, typical San Diego marine layer that wouldn't burn off until afternoon. I packed my laptop carefully, double-checking that both presentations were loaded Madison's fiction and my reality. The Naval Systems building sat right on the harbor, close enough to see destroyers and submarines moored at the naval base. As we walked across the parking lot, Madison was still rehearsing key points under her breath. She had no idea she was walking into a controlled demolition of her own making. The Naval Systems conference room was designed to intimidate. Trophy cases filled with fleet competition awards lined one wall, photographs of submarine commanders and decorated officers covered another. The mahogany table could seat 20 executives comfortably. 18 people filed in that Tuesday morning, including Admiral Patricia Cross, Naval Systems CEO, whose questions would determine our fate. Her silver hair was regulation tight, and her handshake could crack sonar domes. 3 Pentagon tours, 2 submarine commands. Madison's MBA wasn't going to impress her. Madison clicked through her opening slides with practiced confidence, building toward the moment that would either seal the deal or sink the ship. Slides 1 through 3 were safe: company overview, industry analysis, threat assessment mapping, still building credibility. Then came slide 4. Acoustic detection protocols. I watched Admiral Cross's expression shift from polite attention to professional concern as the positioning map appeared. Madison had just recommended using commercial sonar protocols for classified submarine detection operations. "Can you explain this detection methodology?" Admiral Cross asked, her voice maintaining diplomatic neutrality, while her eyes telegraphed skepticism. Madison's confidence never wavered. "Our research shows significant efficiency opportunities in commercial acoustic technology. These recommendations represent a paradigm shift that will revolutionize naval detection capabilities." Miss Taylor, the Admiral, said, ice forming in her voice, "You're recommending that we use commercial-grade sonar systems for tracking nuclear submarines. This would compromise every stealth protocol we've developed in the last 30 years. Are you familiar with Tempest security requirements?" The room began to fracture. Voices rose as procurement officers identified additional problems. Why are you recommending encryption standards that are prohibited for naval use? How can you suggest partnerships with vendors who lack submarine clearance? Are you really proposing communication protocols that would expose our Pacific Fleet positions? Madison floundered, retreating into consultant buzzwords about disruption and innovation. Each answer dug her grave deeper. Then Admiral Cross asked the killing question. Do you have any actual naval experience whatsoever? Silence descended like a dive klaxon. 18 pairs of eyes locked on Madison. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. Mr. Stone, the Admiral said quietly, do you have anything to contribute? Every head turned toward me. Madison went pale, finally understanding that her house of cards was collapsing in real time. I stood smoothing my jacket with the deliberate calm of someone who'd spent 22 years preparing for high-pressure situations. Yes, Admiral. I do. My laptop was already open, real strategy loaded. May I? She nodded curtly. Please. As I connected my presentation cable, Madison remained frozen by the wall like a deer in torpedo sights. The screen flickered. Her fantasy vanished. Reality appeared. Classified acoustic protocols for submarine detection, I said, voice steady and professional. This aligns perfectly with your Tempest requirements and operational security mandates. Commercial targeting would compromise your stealth capabilities and potentially expose Pacific Fleet positions. 45 minutes later, the room had transformed from hostile interrogation to collaborative planning session. Questions became strategic discussions. Concerns evolved into implementation details. Finally, Admiral Cross raised her hand. Mr. Stone, if you had this level of strategic depth available, why were we initially presented with? She gestured toward Madison, still frozen against the wall. I pulled up my evidence folder with the same methodical precision I'd once used to brief submarine commanders. Complete transparency, Admiral. Timestamps, access logs, email trails. The flawed recommendations were internal working documents, never intended for client presentation. They were accessed without authorization and presented as final strategic work. Admiral Cross stood, her command presence filling the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we need a brief recess. Mr. Stone, please remain, everyone else outside. Once alone with the Naval Systems leadership team, the Admiral's bearing softened slightly. That was quite a professional risk you took, son. I met her gaze steadily. My responsibility is to provide accurate analysis, Admiral. I couldn't allow you to make $45 million decisions based on compromised intelligence. 15 years in naval procurement, said the procurement director, and I've rarely seen someone stake their career on professional integrity. We want him leading this engagement. Admiral Cross nodded approvingly. Can you deliver everything you just presented? Yes, ma'am, but I'll need real authority, a dedicated team, and direct access to your security officers. Done. She extended her hand with military precision. Shall we invite the others back? When our team returned, Admiral Cross's message was unambiguous. We're proceeding with one condition. Garrett Stone leads this engagement. Non-negotiable. Madison's face went ashen as her corporate dreams crumbled in real time. Back at Maritime Defense Solutions, news traveled faster than sonar pings. Madison was gone within 3 hours, escorted out by security, while HR handled the legal implications. By 4 p.m., Rachel announced to the entire company, Garrett Stone is now Director of Maritime Strategy. 6 months later, the Naval Systems engagement launched flawlessly, on schedule, under budget, exceeding all security requirements. It generated a 22% increase in Pacific Fleet contract renewals and saved the Navy $4 million in compliance costs. Admiral Cross sent a handwritten note that still sits framed in my office. Integrity under pressure. Semper Fi from an old Marine to an honorable sailor. Last week, Emma got her acceptance letter from UC San Diego, engineering program, partial scholarship. The promotion came with enough salary increase to cover the rest without touching Sarah's life insurance. She's excited about staying close to the naval base where she grew up, and I'm proud that she chose substance over prestige. Bradley got promoted to senior analyst and now mentors other young veterans joining our company. He understands the value of patience, documentation, and professional integrity. The lessons stick when you learn them the hard way. The invisible man was gone. In his place stood someone who understood that the most effective strategy isn't always the loudest one. Sometimes it's simply letting people reveal exactly who they are when they think nobody's watching. Look, if you're over 50 and watching people half your age take credit for your work, you're not alone. The corporate world loves youth and charisma, but it still needs competence and integrity. Document everything. Be patient. When the moment comes to show what real expertise looks like, be ready. Because eventually, style without substance gets exposed, and that's when experience wins. Your time isn't over, it's just getting started.